made a huge contribution here after turning from being a mathematician to doing foundational work in the sociology of maths and then applying those perspectives in the Department of Sociology, but kind of at the heart of the nucleus of scholars around the Science Studies unit, and then the Emerging Technology Studies program, which I was brought here in 1986 to join, already 20 years after the endeavour here had begun. So, and Donald has since made a kind of path-breaking career, oddly enough, applying fantastic insights from his maths and sociology of maths to different areas which are somehow mathematical, whether it's missile guidance or the proof that software does what it does, or algorithmic trading, and now algorithmic advertising. And Donald, you've been a constant inspiration to us and a constant support to this intellectual community, so we're delighted and very pleased to be able to kick us off today. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Robin. Thank you, everyone. A very generous introduction by Robin, but I'm afraid I am not going to reciprocate. I'm going to be very selfish in this talk, because if you're a keynote speaker beginning an event, you're supposed to say slightly vague but inspirational sorts of things, and this is not going to be like that at all. This is a pretty standard research paper, and the reason it's selfish is that this is new research, and this is the first time I've given a full-blown talk on it, though there was an earlier iteration in James's controversies in the Data Society. There'll be a little bit of overlap, I'm sorry, for people who were at James's event. And the most important initial thing to say about the research is I have two collaborators on it. Charlotte Rommerskirchen from Edinburgh Politics and Koray Chaliskan from the New School. My heading is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to start by explaining the words in it: ad servers, header bidding, and material political economy. I'm going to be talking about display advertising. This is not search. This is not what happens when you put something into the search window in Google. This is what happens if you're on Facebook or if you visit the website of a newspaper. You just get ads shown to you without you searching for anything in particular. The decision which ads to show to you is taken by a system called an ad server. The dominant one is Google's ad server. It's a cloud service. It's not an actual single machine sitting everywhere. Header bidding, and that's the main subject of the talk, is where your phone or other device turns into an auctioneer for your attention. So, for example, if you get bored by what I'm saying, use your device and go to, for example, the website of The Guardian, and in the background, header bidding will be taking place. And I'm going to be talking about web advertising. Header bidding is used in other apps as well, but is less successful in those cases, and we can talk about why in the discussion, if you like. So we're talking about web advertising is the concrete sphere I'm talking about. The most important thing to know is that when you visit a website, the ads you are shown are not predetermined, or at least are seldom predetermined. Nearly always, what happens very quickly, takes a second or maybe 2 seconds, is an instantaneous auction takes place of the right to show you an ad in a particular slot. Now, when we think about digital advertising, possibly perfectly rightly, what we think about are issues of data and privacy and the bizarre way in which ads sort of follow you around the web. Those are all important issues, but in this talk I'm going to be shifting attention a bit away from them to other ways in which value is created and captured in this sphere. Why should you care about the materiality of ad auctions other than just as an academic case study? Well, if you care about news journalism, then you should care about this. If, for example, you are a reader of The Guardian via its website, which, as you know, is free to access. The reason it's free to access is up at the top there. It's the ads that you get shown when you visit The Guardian's website. 1 billion of them every month are shown to users. It's a very, very large-scale activity. The final words from the title: material, political, economy. I'm essentially developing here a little bit from the actor network theoretic notion, beautifully laid out by Anna-Marie Moll and John Law, of material politics. There's a little echo of the past, actually. Those of you who are old enough might remember the notion of the social shaping of technology. Now, material politics is theorized better, but the empirical core of the two ideas are not totally different. There are different ways of organizing material practices, of organizing the material world, and which becomes real has a political dimension to it that we can particularly see when there are two ways of organizing that are in contention. And here is what still remains my favorite didactic example of the idea: the milling of grain in the European Middle Ages. Contest between hand mills and water and wind mills, with peasants almost always preferring hand milling, their feudal overlords smashing hand mills. This is a relatively unusual picture on the left. This is an intact Scottish hand mill stone. Most of them that are found are broken, sometimes because, of course, they've been used for masonry purposes, but often because the feudal lord had the right to break the hand mill stones of the tenants. Why? Why did feudal lords do that? Why did they prefer here? This is the Moulin Banal of Braine-le-Château in Belgium. Banal because it was subject to a banalité. If you were a tenant, you had to mill your grain on the Moulin Banal, and there was a fee. At Braine, 1 sack in 22 went to the feudal overlord. Now, it doesn't sound too much, but that's 2 weeks, or going towards 3 weeks of the year you're not eating, because that sack has gone to the overlord. So that's why I add to the actor network notion of material politics material political economy, because we need to keep such practical economic matters in mind. You need to, in the sphere I'm talking about, a wonderful study by the auditors PwC for the Incorporated Society of British Advertisers tried to follow the money in the system that I'm about to lay out in front of you. Only half of it reached publishers such as The Guardian, and 15% simply could not be traced at all. It just seemed to vanish in the machinery. And that, of course, if you care about journalism, that's something that should concern you. So what I'm going to be talking about, some people call platform capitalism. And empirically investigating its material politics is hard, as those of you who have tried to do it will testify, because the materiality of these systems is kept deliberately opaque. I'm taking here methodological advantage, though, of the fact that a system crucial to platform capitalism, Google's ad server, DFP, double-click for publishers, has been hacked, as the interviewees that we've spoken to put it. By that, they do not mean that they've gained illicit access to DFP, but they've taken this system crucial to platform capitalism and got it to do things that it was not designed to do. They have enveloped it in different material practices. And the hack is header bidding, and that's what I'm going to be explaining to you in a moment. A very brief, very quick history of the sphere of web advertising. Began rather similar to print advertising, direct deals between advertisers and publishers, a fixed rate per 1,000 impressions, per thousands of times an ad is shown, often a deal sealed over lunch with a martini. But the web is a big place. There are lots of slots on which to advertise on the web, so even the most high prestige publisher couldn't always fill every ad slot with a direct deal. So they were left with what was called remnant, the stuff that could not be sold via direct deals, and that would be distributed by other means, through ad networks, through what became called as supply-side platforms that took the remnant from various publishers and aggregated it and sold it cheaply to advertisers. Supply-side platforms including Rubicon Project. Now, you can read histories of The Guardian. Rubicon is not mentioned, partly because there was a bad falling out between Rubicon and The Guardian. But why The Guardian's website could remain free to access has got something to do with Rubicon's activities on behalf of The Guardian. Jamie Fleck is with us, and those of you who know Jamie's work will find an echo of that here. Jamie contrasted in classic work more than 30 years ago, integrated systems with more loosely configured configurations, more loosely organized configurations. And there's an echo of this here. This is what Jamie would call the configuration. I'm using it in a slightly looser kind of sense. It's a complex, multi-actor ecosystem with at its heart machines, ad servers, particularly the ad server developed by a firm called DoubleClick, the most prominent firm in this ecosystem. And the ad server, as I said, is the machine or set of machines that takes the final decision which ad to show to you. And how its ad server worked is it would prioritize the publisher's direct deals, and then if there was stuff left over, via what was called a line item, which is the basic component of an advertising campaign, via that lower priority line item, it would pass the remnant ad slot to a supply-side platform or ad network. That's where DoubleClick had its offices. It looks better than that now, that building. It was renovated as part of the Hudson Yards development. So that's, in Jamie's terms, the configuration. Now the integrated system developed by Google. Page and Brin, in their 2006 founders letter to Google's investors, wrote this: "Our goal is to create a single and complete advertising system." Now, big statements from corporate leaders or university vice chancellors need, of course, taken with a pinch of salt. But Google put its money where its mouth was and bought a series of firms to help them create the system. The most consequential of the purchases was the first of them, the 2008 acquisition of DoubleClick. Ad server developer, the most prominent firm in the looser configuration, and that brought Google two things: DoubleClick's ad server. Google, to give them credit, kept the name. They called it DFP, DoubleClick for publishers. And a nascent advertising exchange where supply and demand would be brought together algorithmically, called AdX. The ad server is a distributed machine, but it's still a machine. It's still material. The European Union's policymakers, for example, approved the DoubleClick acquisition on the basis of the economic reasoning that the fees for ad serving were just a small proportion of advertising's costs, and other ad servers than DoubleClick's were available. But there was an error in that reasoning. The lawyers and economists at the European Commission grossly underestimated the significance of the materiality of ad servers. To develop to keep an ad server competitive, you had to keep changing it as new advertising formats, video ads, mobile phone ads, and so on came along. And you had to scale the system so it could operate over thousands of servers to keep up with the volume of advertising opportunities that needed to be processed. Just one firm turned out to be able to do this successfully. Google thoroughly re-engineered the ad server they had inherited from DoubleClick, placing the machines in the giant purpose-built data centers they were constructed. This is a picture of the first of them, the Dalles on the Oregon side of the Columbia River. Now, I like the materiality of the image because you can see the plumes of steam over the cooling towers of Google's data center. But don't let's slip into some sort of Zuboff-style notion of all powerful surveillance capitalism. The thousands of machines packed into those data centers were held together by Velcro. Google was using cheap components and, well, all material systems fail. Cheap material systems fail more often than the Velcro was there, so you could take the hard drive, just pull it off and stick another hard drive in to replace it without having to take the time to unscrew anything. The integrated system turned out to be a very powerful rival to the looser configuration. By 2014, the US federal antitrust competition law regulators, the Federal Trade Commission, were starting an informal inquiry, but it led nowhere. The integrated system was about to be challenged, but the challenge turned out to be material rather than legal. My image here, this is the visual trace of the challenge. If you want to see it for yourself, download the Chrome extension HeaderBid Expert and visit a website with HeaderBid Expert running, and you'll see something like this. The bids, the requests for bids going out. But to understand header bidding, we need to understand how the integrated system operated in a bit more detail. Economic action took place within and between computer servers. As soon as a user visited a page, Google's ad server, DFP, would be electronically called, and it would in its turn call Google's ad exchange, AdX. AdX would run an instantaneous auction. And then, and this in a certain sense was the pivotal thing that made the integrated system successful, then DFP would do what's called dynamic allocation. It would weigh up whether the publisher's direct deals were on course to be filled, and if they were, it would allocate that ad impression to the highest bidder in the auction. Publishers loved that aspect. It made them more money, being able to take direct real-time bids when those were substantially better than your direct deal prices made advertisers more money. So supply-side platforms did have a place in the system, but it was almost literally a lowly kind of place. So even Rubicon, which is the most successful of the supply-side platforms, the partner, as I said, of The Guardian, it would just be a line item, or perhaps in some cases a small set of line items ranked in DFP below the publisher's direct deals. So those supply-side platforms became the crucial proponents of header bidding. So what's, in contrast, header bidding? Well, in its original iteration, there's a further development called server-side header bidding that I'm going to talk about just very briefly. In its original iteration, it's the user's device that's central to the auction. Your browser sends out the requests for bids. DFP, Google's ad server, is called, but only after the various supply-side platforms have had the opportunity to place bids first. So the effect is that once DFP is called, there is, in effect, a reserve price, a floor price in the auction, which is the highest bid that your browser has obtained. The hack is that DFP was not designed to support header bidding. And how it was done, how it still is done, is by repurposing a data field within DFP that's designed for ad targeting and populating it instead with a bid price and creating not just one line item, but thousands of line items, tens of thousands of line items, in some cases, I believe, over 100,000 line items are created in this way by DFP. Originally, it's now been automated, but originally it was done manually. Junior staff at the publisher would sit for hours and hours on end creating one line item out after another by keyboard and mouse. There's a lot of distrust in online advertising about economic motivations and economic behavior. People know that money disappears in the pipework. Supply-side platforms did not trust each other, and they started header bidding by doing it individually, each of them individually approaching the publisher to get their code, their script, into the invisible header of web pages. And the script was synchronous. That's to say, everything would be paused while the page loading would be paused while the script loaded, and would continue only once the script had done its work. Not too bad if there's just one supply-side platform doing that. If there are lots of supply-side platforms doing that, it slows things down very noticeably. It becomes a bad user experience. The logjam was materially broken by an open source software project called Pre-Bid. Pre referring to the fact that the bids are being sought before the ad server is called. Controversial both within the firm at Nexus that pushed for it, and also in the wider industry. Lots of screaming and yelling. One of the interviewees said to me, but gradual acceptance. Your phone has some surprising advantages in this sphere. It's neutral terrain. None of the supply-side platforms own it or in any very real sense control it. And that's one of the things that people like about the use of your device as part of the economic system, but it does bring some disadvantages in terms of delay. So there's been a move to a server-side version of header bidding. But then, it's one thing having open source code that everyone can read and inspect, but move that open source code onto a server, move it from your device's browser onto a server, then you have to worry about the owner of the server doing things that may disadvantage you. British publishers, and this is one of the things I've found really fascinating in this work, British news publishers, Guardian at one end, The Times, Telegraph, The Sun at the other, so quite a political spectrum, have come together in an ad tech collective called the Ozone Project, in good part to run server-side header bidding on a system that's trusted because it's not the property of any particular supply-side platform. Two limitations on its success. It involves a lot of duplication of bids. So me clicking on the Guardian's homepage, just one user, one ad slot, what's called the banner head ad slot, but it can become several dozen bid requests as it percolates through this complicated configuration. And secondly, the central machine remains an obligatory point of passage. This challenge to Google and DFP has not succeeded in displacing DFP. And in discussion, we can talk a bit more about why that's the case. So that's one aspect of the material politics of header bidding. The other is Google's reaction to header bidding. Google was not enthusiastic about header bidding, and in a certain sense you can see why. Their system was being hacked, so to speak, by the technique. They developed something that in a sense does the same kind of job, but within the Google ecosystem. That something is called exchange bidding, now called open bidding. Internally, its code name was JEDI, which of course has a sort of confrontational, maybe a sort of mind trickster sort of connotation. And what's got Google into certain trouble is a variant of JEDI, internally called JEDI Blue. The blue is a reference to the color of the Facebook logo, and it was a very concerted effort to get Facebook, which had been flirting with header bidding, to adopt Google's exchange bidding instead. Now, it's very, very easy in this kind of sphere to fall into simplistic criticism of Google and simplistic anti-Google rhetoric, and I don't want to do that. Google could materially have quashed header bidding simply by restricting the number of line items that a publisher could have within their instance of DoubleClick for publishers. And there was a limit, but I've been interrogating my publisher contacts as to whether they've experienced Google, for example, rejecting requests to increase the number of line items available to them. and it seems not. So Google could have squashed the technique by that very simple material means and chose not to. Indeed, most recently, last month, Google announced that they had in beta test a bridge between DoubleClick for Publishers and Prebid, the open source software. And once that's in place, it will be possible for header bidding bids to be represented directly in DFP. There will no longer be the cumbersome process of creating tens of thousands of line items to get the technique to work. But perhaps the acceptance has come a little too late, because there is a lawsuit going on in the United States led by Ken Paxton, the Republican Attorney General of Texas. There's also, for example, an investigation of Jedi Blue. This is the original. I love this because I used to study nuclear weapons technology, and you kept on finding documents with the crucial things blacked out. What's blacked out here is in part just that expression, Jedi Blue, but the court has now released the uncensored version of the Texas complaint. It is potentially serious. Paxton and his co-litigants are seeking structural relief. I mean, that sounds a vague thing, but it might mean the breaking up of Google. Google being unable to continue to operate a unified system as a unified corporation. And I trust this slide is not necessary for this audience. This shows that even though material politics sounds like a matter of technicalities, and it is a matter of technicalities, but those technicalities matter more than you might at first think. And of course, if this saga leads to the breakup of Google, the defining corporation of the information age, that will show that material politics does matter. Any individual case is going to have its idiosyncrasies, and of course there are many idiosyncrasies of the story that I've just told you, like the unusual extent and sophistication of the challenge to Google's system. But I think that whenever we're able to open the opaque boxes of platform capitalism, we're going to find material politics in there. The politics of privacy, for example, are of course material politics. They're about what should materially pass between the user, their device, the ad server, and then any other servers involved in the interaction. Okay, so that's it. Most of those photos aren't my own, so those are the image credits. Thank you very much.